Hello, and thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate it. I had a bit of information that I didn't really want to wait until tomorrow. I wanted to share it. So this is just going to be quick, but I'm going to information dump you and then I'm going to get on with prepping for my Andy Webb interview. But there has been several reports that Fergie is frightened for her life. Now, when I first heard these reports, I dismissed them as just hysterical sympathy sort of grab, typical Fergie. I didn't really believe that there was any truth to it. However, it appears that there may be some element of truth to it. And that's what I want to examine in this episode and also present to you in this episode so you can make up your own mind. Now, before we get on to what's reported, and I do have information that was reported and sourced, let's just get back to what we know. What we know as ordinary people from what we've observed. Now, I've got a lot of notes, so you're going to see me looking down. Sorry if that appears rude, but I want to be accurate. We know that Sarah Ferguson had a close and ongoing relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. We know that as a fact now, due to her own emails, right? We also know that she was in debt to him, because he evidently paid for quite a few of her bills. Now, in Andrew Lownie's book entitled, we learnt that it wasn't just £15,000. He asserts that the debt was actually a lot more than that. It could be in the region of up to £2 million that Fergie was in the hole to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, when you think about it, someone with the character of Jeffrey Epstein is not going to hand over millions and millions of pounds without a return. There had to be something that he was getting out of that relationship to warrant handing over that level of money, if indeed that can be actually traced and, proven definitively. But Andrew Lownie is completely confident in his sources because it was published in his book. What am I saying? Fairly. It was published. He's prepared to back it up. He's got the sources. Okay, so we'll just leave that to one side. So, millions of pounds. Now, I wouldn't want to be owing someone like Jeffrey Epstein millions of pounds. That would concern me. It would make me feel vulnerable. And I would imagine that only someone that was confident in the protection they were afforded through their close association of the royal family, through their close association of being an ex-wife of now the brother of the king, but at the time the son of the monarch, that would give you a fair degree of confidence that you were afforded some protection that went above and beyond what people like us would get if we were in the same situation. So we've established that she was vulnerable, but not vulnerable because she was very clearly protected by her association with the royal family, despite being an ex-wife. Now, I think Sarah had the expectation, let's get a picture of Sarah up just so we can remind ourselves what she looks like. Sarah would have had an expectation that because she supported Andrew through all these very difficult years, defended him to the hilt, ensured that in his darkest moments he had company and support, that she would remain in favour with the royal family. And she's made it very clear, particularly in the last week, that that was what she expected. She expected that she would be, if not rewarded, recognised for her efforts and the benefit she provided to the royal family by taking on that role with Andrew. And it could be argued that she had a reasonable expectation. So there's a headline, tabloid headline, but this goes way beyond tabloid headlines now. So that's why I wanted to present this story. Now, this expectation, we had a demonstration of this. I've just gone out quickly and gathered you some headlines. Now, this was around the time of the Chinese spy story breaking. Now, we learned through numerous Royal Rota members that King Charles was grateful to Sarah Ferguson for helping Prince Andrew through his darkest time. It was even intimated to us through briefings from the palace and through the Royal Rota articles that Sarah was in fact almost a carer for Andrew, that he had reached such a dark and dismal place that she was vital to his mental health, that she was the on-the-ground mental health support for the Queen's son. Then we get the Chinese spy allegations, and we now know, because King Charles told us through the Times, that he was very grateful to Sarah Ferguson for keeping Prince Andrew away from that Christmas at Sandringham. When the Chinese spy scandal broke, you will remember that rather than ordering he not appear at Christmas at Sandringham in that year, he was very grateful to Sarah Ferguson going sort of around softly and talking Andrew into not showing up. Okay, so they owed her. They owed her big time. Then we had other articles where Sarah was saying that he's a very sad man, and again, that implication that she was basically a carer, that she was vital to his mental health, and if she wasn't around, something truly dreadful and tragic could happen because he was in such a dark place. And there was headlines, and this was, from Daniela Elsa, so we won't put too much credence on it, but it was reflective of the headlines at the time. One woman who can save the royals. It was Sarah Ferguson with her cape on. So that's the setup. Now, we know that she was invited to Christmas at Sandringham. She thought she'd been re-embraced. That's really important. She thought she'd been re-embraced. Now, that was before they needed her for the Chinese spy scandal and for the basically carer role, because more revelations came out and, it just kept getting worse. After that first initial re-embracing Christmas at Sandringham, things went downhill from there. But she also had the expectation that she was on the in when she had her cancer diagnosis. And the king invited her to charity dues to do with his cancer initiatives. And they didn't try to hide her. In fact, I would say she was featured because she was seen as hugely popular. The way she bravely fought her breast cancer endeared her to many people. People already had sympathy for her because they perceived her as a lovely carer of the Queen's dogs. There was a lot of good vibe about Sarah. Around the time she was re-embraced for that walk, that Christmas walk at Sandringham, things were looking pretty good. Now let's face facts. If Queen Elizabeth II had been alive, that wouldn't have happened. She wouldn't have been re-embraced. That's something I am absolutely sure of. You can disagree with me, but I'm convinced of that. So we have her steadfast loyalty to Andrew being emphasised throughout the media constantly. We have reports of her at the time solving the king's problems, which I've just displayed with those headlines. We've also got, the palace expressing gratitude to her, which elevated her in the public's mind as someone trustworthy, honourable, reliable, trusted by the palace. She was also elevated due to her position of being the mother of the princesses, Eugenie and Beatrice. Now, she also kept her head down. She didn't have any more major scandals after the Cash for Access scandal, trying to sell access to her husband for $500,000. She kept her head down after that. She had perfectly respectable book launches of her romance novels. They were very well received. There was lots of sycophantic interviews sharing warm and fuzzy tales about the Queen and things that the Queen had supposedly said to her that we will never be able to verify. And like I said, the focus on the dogs, which I have always said from the get-go was a blatant, opportunistic setup, strategic setup, that before the Queen died, they made sure they gave her some dogs so that when she died, they could get them back and use them and milk them for PR opportunities and supposed close association with the late monarch. That's awfully cynical, but that's how I always saw it. Way before Andrew Lownie came into my orbit, I was on to Sarah. And if you go back through my videos, you will see that I was. Now, it's all gone. And with everything, it's really gone. The money, the status, her private wing at Royal Lodge, and all her social invitations. She is firmly on the outer, She is completely on her own. She really doesn't have a lot of options. Now, I'm not saying this to give her sympathy. You'll see why I'm saying it in a minute, because I want to set up the premise, the foundation of the fact that she is vulnerable. Now, whether we have sympathy for her or not, and I don't have sympathy for her because her shenanigans over the years have been incredibly harmful to other people. They've cost, people that can't afford it a lot of money. There's been, a whole lot of things that have gone on. You just have to read Andrew Lownie's book. I'm not plugging his book anymore, but it's all in here if you want to know all her dastardly deeds. So I'm not talking sympathy. I'm talking vulnerability. There's a difference. Okay. Now, living in Royal Lodge, even though it was outside the security cordon of Windsor, was still considerably safer than living as a private citizen outside the umbrella of the royal family. Considerably safer. That's gone. So we've heard her expressing her genuine fear. We've heard tabloid stories about her turning up at the pub near Royal Lodge, having a few and, basically crying over her beer, although I'm sure it's not beer, I'm sure it's champagne, saying how terrified she is. And now that she will be a target that by people that have something to hide, she could be a very real target. Think about it. I mean, how much does she know? She had a very long and close association with Epstein. The tone of the emails was such that they were, quite friendly. It would even maybe confess things to each other, would share information. So if there's anyone out there that still has a lot to hide, Sarah Ferguson is a loose cannon outside the auspices of the royal family is a target. She's a vulnerable target. I think her fear is perfectly valid. So let's get on to more sort of information that we can really get into, some juicy information. So I've been into Andrew Lownie's Substack, and this is what he shared in the last few days. This is the headline: The Lownie Report, world exclusive. Sociopath Jeffrey Epstein plotted to take out ex-Prince Andrew and Fergie weeks before he was found dead. He also feared the monarchy was planning an extrajudicial killing. Now, I'm not going to get into that because I'm just thinking, well, okay, I'm going to have to talk to you in person about that one. He's coming on the 24th, so I'll ask him all about it. Now, just because I'm sharing Andrew Lownie's Substack does not mean that I've had a chance to test the veracity of any of these claims. It doesn't mean that I've had a chance to look into any of it or do any research. I'm purely sharing the information. But I do have a lot of respect for Andrew, and I have found in our association over nearly 2 years now that often the things that shock me the most, often the things that I think, oh, come off it, you're going a bit far there, turn out to be true. Now, I'm not saying that this is true, but he has a source that has shared really major information. Now, I'm going to do a direct quote because I don't want to, just present paraphrasing of what he's saying in this article. This is the direct quote. A person deeply connected to sociopath Jeffrey Epstein told the Lownie Report that Epstein harbored homicidal thoughts weeks before he was found dead. So we're not talking suicidal thoughts. We're talking homicidal thoughts. He devised a detailed plan to take out Prince Andrew and Fergie, the source said. He was worried that they would foil and spill damaging information about him. He felt strongly that both Andrew and Fergie had breached his trust and were planning to leak key information about him in an attempt to save their own skins. Now, that all sounds perfectly plausible because when you think about it, Jeffrey Epstein had a lot to lose, and he spent a lot of time with a lot of people. Now, it's been reported that he spent a lot of time with Bill Clinton for travel purposes and also for foundation work. He also spent a lot of time, allegedly, with Donald Trump. He also spent a lot of time with major tech icons. He also spent a lot of time with Prince Andrew and presumably Sarah Ferguson. So what are her choices to stay safe? Really, what are they? Where can she go? Who can she talk to? Who can she trust? If she has anything to tell, who can she trust that information with? Because how do you know who's in on this network and who isn't? How do you know what areas of law enforcement are your safe harbour or not? How do you know? How do you know? How could anyone know the way this story is unfolding? Jeffrey developed a concrete plan to eliminate both of them and had been in talks with a notorious UK sniper for hire. If Jeffrey hadn't died, Andrew and Fergie would have been murdered. They knew too much about his sex trafficking ring. Now, I know this sounds like a James Bond novel, but look who's writing it. Andrew Lownie has contacts in British intelligence. He's quite open about that. He quotes them. The research that he did for this book over 4 years, you can only begin to fathom the sources he has, the insiders he has. So when he writes something like this, I don't tend to dismiss it out of hand. The former friend of Epstein said Epstein was more worried about Fergie than Andrew. And this is why. Fergie's got a big mouth. That was my input. Jeffrey said Fergie used to tell him about other people's secrets. Now, I'm just going to interject here and say that I have been implying for many, many years that Sarah Ferguson did have a big mouth, that Sarah Ferguson used to share a lot of information, in my opinion, outside of the royal family. Now, I've produced videos where I reviewed Piers Morgan's book, for example, The Insider, where she used to go and have big boozy lunches with Piers Morgan. And he would admit in his book that she could get quite indiscreet after a few glasses of champers. And you can only imagine what she said, because she was much less discreet, much less careful in her younger days. And I'm also firmly convinced from things people have told me and from things that you can read yourself and from books I have read, that that is the key reason why Princess Diana distanced herself from her before she died. Up to a year before she died, she wanted nothing to do with Sarah. Now, that could have been caused by the fact of things like, you know, the photographs of Sarah in Saint-Tropez. It could have been the Squidgygate tapes, because don't forget, Diana knew about those 2 years before they were published. Also, the, other secrets that have been put down to phone hacking, things like that. How can we know the origin of a lot of these secrets? We can't know. We can only surmise. But we do know, and it is on the record, that Princess Diana wanted nothing to do with Sarah Ferguson for at least a year before she died. And it had nothing to do with tales about her having some sort of fungal infection on her feet because Sarah borrowed her shoes. Went much deeper than that. Okay, so let's go back to the rest of this. I'm not sharing the whole article from Andrew. I will be linking to his Substack underneath this. This is from areas that were actually for public access, and you can, I think you have to subscribe now behind a paywall if you want to get the full article, but I will put it in the description when I finish this live. He said most likely she would not hesitate to tell his secrets. He'd lost complete trust in both Fergie and Andrew and wanted them out of the picture forever. So that is really, really telling, isn't it? And quite terrifying. I can see her dilemma. And like I say, I don't feel sympathy, but I feel recognition of the position that she is in. So other than trying to stay safe, there's been other leakings and briefings about Sarah in the last few days, that she's likely to leave the UK and move in with her daughter, Princess Eugenie, and her husband, Jack Brooksbank. I pity them. I pity them. Sarah, do not. They're a young family with young children. They don't want you there. I can guarantee they don't want you there. So maybe get another house at the other end of the resort that you have to get into a golf cart to visit. I think that would be even the minimum distance that they would need. Evidently, they've got a multi-million-dollar mansion in Portugal, and she's planning to move in with them. No, I don't think you get to behave in such an appalling manner, and then as soon as things go pear-shaped, ring up your daughter and say, "Can I come and live with you?" No, you can't. Find your own digs, Mum. So, socialite and party planner Liz Brewer told this newspaper, which was the Express newspaper, that Ferguson has always been very personable, but, big but here, admitted she was currently unwelcome at high society gatherings. It's clearly been reported that no one's even picking up the phone. No one's answering her calls. No one's talking to her. So all the money that Sarah wasted buying extravagant presents and shouting holidays and borrowing from other friends to shout other friends these luxurious treats has just all fallen flat. They don't want to know. Because once she lost her position, she is of no interest whatsoever. There's nothing like real friends, is there? Nothing like it. Ferguson is reportedly considering her options to restore her finances. Now, what has been touted is an Oprah Winfrey interview. Now, I don't think that would bring in enough. I mean, the most she could expect to receive for that would be, what, $1 million, 1.2 million? Oprah's a bit on the nose now. She's definitely down on the slide. I don't think that I don't think that's the big coup that it once was. I mean, if she went on Joe Rogan, now that would be something different. I think that would get a lot more eyes than Oprah. And, then there's always the book deals, all those sort of stories that are being bandied about. Now, let's go on to Andrew. In contrast, oh no, I've got one more about Sarah. Sorry, Sarah, there's more awful things befalling you. A press statement came out, a definitive press statement. There's been rumours about this. Now it's been confirmed that Kindness Along the Way, her book, her Flora and Fern book that was due to come out, has been definitely pulled. Now, there were rumours that it was going to be pulled, but it's definitely pulled. So it was slated for sale from November 20th. Not happening now. Not even happening. Sorry about that, Sarah. Now we'll get on to Andrew. Now, Andrew's fate seems to be a little bit more assured. He's still the little brother of the current king. He's still protected within the private confines of Sandringham, or he will be. And I honestly doubt that the king is going to allow anything to happen to his little brother. No matter how much he just disapproves of what he's done or not done, or what he's been intimated to have done, I don't think he would allow anything to happen to him. Because I think if he did, then the whole royal family would feel awfully vulnerable. So I don't think that is going to happen. But he's had a pretty drastic demotion, as you know. Now, reports are that staff, particularly at Windsor, took great glee recently when Andrew actually turned up at Windsor Castle. And despite demanding a home on Sandringham sort of befitting his status and a whole rota of staff, he's not getting the bowed heads. He's not getting any reverence or deference when he turns up at Windsor. His princely title has now gone. He's not saluted by the guards. Now, you can imagine the impact of that on someone that set great store by having people be deferential to him. And many of you may not have noticed this, and I don't know who the gentleman was. I didn't have time to look it up. But if you go back and look at the film of the Duchess of Kent's funeral, you will see that a gentleman, I don't know who he was, came up and spoke to Andrew. This is when Andrew and Sarah were standing behind the Prince and Princess of Wales and the King. They were still behind. He hadn't moseyed his way up next to William yet. And this man came up and spoke to him, and I was watching because it was, like I said, behind the scenes. And Andrew looked very haughty and very superior at this man. And the man stopped talking, and then he did a bow. He bowed his head to the then Prince Andrew. And I thought, oh my goodness me, he has demanded deference according to his rank from this man that came up to speak to him, that I gathered was just coming up to speak to him to be friendly, that actually probably felt quite sorry for him because everyone was avoiding them both like a bad smell. No one wanted to be near them because of who they were. I mean, police escort to the Duchess of York funeral or not, really on the nose. So I noticed that bow. It was a very definite head bow. So he's not getting them anymore. He's not getting the customary bows. And look, the staff apparently are reveling in it because he was such an asshole. And if you're an asshole to people, when you're on the way back down, they will gleefully celebrate. That's why you've got to be, nice to everybody as much as you can, because you never know when you're going to need them or when your situations are going to be reversed. So Richard Eden suggested that a secret deal was made between the King and the former Duke of York, which you know. But isn't it interesting that the King would enter into such an arrangement rather than being extremely strong and saying, get out. I don't care what your lease says, get out of Royal Lodge. If you don't get out in a nice manner, voluntarily, I'll make sure I get you out in another way, and it's not going to be pleasant, and I'll make sure that your reputation will be even more damaged if you don't get out. Really hard line, do what I say, my way or the highway. I don't think the King needed to make deals. I don't think that Andrew or Sarah, or quite frankly the girls, were in a position where the King needed to make a deal. All he had to do was make a firm statement, take away the Prince title, which is what he did, take away formally the HRH, which he did, I'll due credit, but he didn't need to make deals. Now he's backed himself into another quite silly corner because he wasn't, as everyone keeps saying, William's going to be ruthless. The King needed to be ruthless in that moment. That's what the situation required. So we all know that the US House Oversight Committee, now this is both Democratic and Republican on the Oversight Committee. A lot of people don't realize that it is a bipartisan Oversight Committee. Now they've just recently released over 20,000 pages of documents from the Jeffrey Epstein estate, and this has included thousands of emails. Now they subpoenaed the estate. And this built on prior releases. The DOJ released a February 2025 batch, but the files were redacted, obviously, to protect victims' identities. Now, I'm not into redaction other than victims' identities. I think everything else should be completely unredacted. I think all the files should be released, and I think only victims should be protected. Now, I said when I was going after Andrew over the last year that if there was any major news concerning other possible perpetrators, that I would actually name them. I'm going to do a separate video when more evidence comes out. Because to tell you the truth, I'm not going to protect, a tech giant. There's been allegations, as yet unproven, against Bill Gates, Elon Musk. I'm not going to be protecting them. If plausible evidence is presented that people in the know, people in law enforcement are accepting and willing to act on, then I'm not going to protect them. I'm not going to protect a Bill Clinton either if allegations against him are proved. I don't care. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're an ex-president. I don't care what side of politics you're on. You are a perpetrator and you deserve to be held to account. I don't care if it happens to be the current president of the United States, although my heart goes out to the people of the USA. What a horrible, situation that would be. But I'm not going to defend that either, because I don't care who it is. I don't care what side of politics it's on. I only care about the victims. And I think most people here feel exactly the same way. Okay, so this release stems from investigations. It's not only emails, It stems from investigations into Epstein's sex trafficking network and related financial crimes. And they include correspondence, as you know, and the correspondence spans from 2007 through to 2019. Now, some of it's mild. It just covers his displeasure with political foes, property deals. He's often whinging about property deals he makes with other billionaires, and of course, alleged victim interactions. And that's the important thing. Okay, so I'll be keeping track of any prominent Americans that are mentioned in all of this because, you know, the UK has taken a bashing, as you know, with all the evidence that was released against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Sarah Ferguson, and, you know, Ghislaine Maxwell is English. And we also, Mandelson, too, had to step down as US ambassador. The only American I know of note that's suffered in any way is Jess Staley. And he's banned from financial, you know, activities in the UK. So it will be good if more are held to account. Don't care what side of politics they're on. One of the interesting things from the email dump is the fact that they have videos. There are videos. This is a list of the videos. This is just one example of the videos that are held. Now, that's quite fascinating, isn't it? I'll bring it up big so you can have more of a chance to have a look at it. You can see that there's quite a few VHS tapes. Now, of course, we don't know what's on them, but I find it highly encouraging that record of their existence is still there, that it hasn't been destroyed. That probably gives victims great hope as well. It's a good thing. Now, I posted this on Substack, and I mean it, because I'm into summarizing facts and the current state of play. All right, so I just said it's simple, really. Ghislaine Maxwell is in a minimum security prison for the sex trafficking of minors. That's a fact. Now, she was convicted in a USA court of law, and sufficient evidence was found to sentence her to 20 years in prison. And now she's basically in a holiday resort after being convicted for sex trafficking of minors. Now, there were 4 main victims that were used in her trial to prove that case. Virginia Giuffre was not one of them. So people that use their, their undermining of Virginia Giuffre to undermine this whole case, it's just silly, because she didn't have any say in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. It was 4 other victims. Now, these 4 other victims have made allegations against other major political figures in the USA. And their testimony cannot be discounted because Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted on the basis of that evidence. So Virginia Giuffre does not come into everything. She can't be your excuse for everything. She's not a defense against everything, because there's 40 other victims with valid evidence. The FBI was giving the evidence and the names back in 2006 from over 40 victims. This has been suppressed ever since. Now, you think about it. This evidence has been suppressed across multiple administrations. Now, since 2006, there have been administrations from both sides of USA politics. Multiple administrations have not moved this story forward, have not sought justice for victims, have not exposed perpetrators. It is not the right side of politics or the left side of politics, because there was ample opportunity to right this wrong, ample, since 2006. So it isn't a political issue. And they want you to believe that it's a political issue, and they want you to not listen to evidence based on political bias. And they want to turn you against each other and to make you not trust each other just because you happen to be on the wrong side of politics. Don't let them do it. Don't let them do it, because that's how they'll get away with it. If we cross political lines and just purely demand justice for victims, then they won't get away with it. And that's my stand. So in the next few weeks, if I share information, I'm not doing it because I'm trying to pull down one side of politics in the USA. The only videos I've ever made about Donald Trump were in relation to tariffs on my other channel. I've since closed that down. I'm going to turn that channel into something else because I realized that I was just feeding into the bias and the angst and the tribal hate that was already out there. I don't want to be a part of that. Now, I had legitimate concerns about the tariffs that he was imposing on my country, Australia. It made me really, really angry. And I made videos about it because I defend my country. I also was really angry about the tariffs that were put on Canada because I could see how illogical it was, and I explained all that in the videos, which no longer exist. I took them down. They were very good, actually, very factually based. But I don't have an agenda here. I don't. Because if the Biden administration had have imposed the same tariffs on my country that produced the same damaging result, I would have made the same video. So I hope you trust me in that I'm not trying to feed an agenda. And my interest in this story is related to the royal family because we are literally at the tip of the iceberg. I'm losing my voice. I've got so passionate. But we are at the tip of the iceberg. More is going to come out. So I hope I've interested you with the position that Sarah Ferguson is in. I think that it's, wise to sort of go away and think about that and think about what would you do? How would you make yourself safe? What's the next move you would make? I've tried to think about this and I've, laid awake and thought, what would I do? What would my move be? And I thought, well, would I go to MI5? Would I go to MI6 because they're the international mob? And I thought, but how does she know who to trust? How does she know who's safe in those networks? Can she go to the FBI? Evidently not. They're not willing to release what they've got. Can't go to the Department of Justice in America. I guess the only thing she could do was offer information for immunity, but then she becomes more of a target. So do you see the dilemma that she is in because she is now outside the auspices of the royal family? Final question before I go. Do you think, regardless of what she has or hasn't done, do you think that the royal family, not the taxpayer, the royal family has a duty of care to offer her some form of protection due to her high-profile association with the royal family due to her marriage to the ex-Prince Andrew? Answer that question in the comments down below. I would be really interested to see your thoughts. I haven't decided yet, and I'm going to share your thoughts in a future program. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm going to toodle off now, and I'm going to do some more research before my Andy Webb interview so I can make it really good for you. See you later on. Thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks to everyone in the chat, and thank you for the enormously generous tip, Suzanne King. I think you've paid enough that I should share your comment. The corruption isn't endemic to one or the other political party. The corruption does involve class. Fascinating. That is a really fascinating thought. And I think that's something I might pursue in a future program. That is really, really interesting. And I think on this show, we can discuss this, not divide into tribes, not allocate blame based on political beliefs. I think we should just examine evidence as it comes up and discuss it, chat about it, particularly, like I said, if it's related to the royal family. I'm not going to do a big expose because I don't know enough about USA politics. I am not qualified to speak on that. I don't have any background in it. I don't even know how the political system works. I would just be, pretty much making stuff up. So that's why I stuck with today with information that I know, that I understand, and that's what I'll be doing in future programs. So thanks a lot for joining me, and look, we can be a part of history, if only to just be a part of it and discuss it. So I'll see you again soon. See you. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for joining me.